Hello and welcome everyone to today's Topic Tuesday webinar. We are excited that you're joining us this morning. We have got some fantastic presenters that are going to share with you all some great data sources. I know that you've asked for this, we've listened to you, and this is here for your benefit in the space of helping your students make those data-driven decisions in their college journey. So as you join us today, as always, welcome to our webinar. We want to interact with you as best as possible in the webinar space. And so during the presentation, feel free to utilize the chat bot to communicate, the chat box to communicate with our presenters. They will do so if they have links or data to share with you all. And then the Q&A, if you've got a specific content question, we're going to be monitoring that. We're going to be having a Q&A time at the end. And then if it's really pertinent, we will make sure that it's answered in that space. So those are the features that you see at the bottom. So we would love to interact with you today as our friends are joining us. So as always, we've got a poll to ask as our intro. So I'm going to launch that poll right now. The question is, what percent of the 2021 Mississippi seniors enrolled in college the fall immediately after high school graduation? All right, give everybody, as you're joining us, welcome to our webinar. We have an intro kind of mind-setting poll, if you will. We'll have several interactions throughout today's presentations from our great presenters all about those data-driven decisions to support your students. All right, give everybody a few more minutes to answer. Our options are 65%, 73%, or 54%. So what percent of the 2021 Mississippi graduates enrolled in college immediately after high school graduation? All right, give everybody about 5 more seconds to get that answer in. Okay, so let me share out the results. The answer is 54%. So while we see a lot of people answer that, we had a good portion that thought 65, and some of our friends joining us today, 73%. So we're going to kind of dig into around this topic of knowing how the students enroll after they walk across your stage, in how we can make sure that we support students in their college journey with those data decisions to help support them. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Shannon to let her introduce the webinar today.
All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I am Shannon Grimsley, the Director of State Outreach for the Woodward-Hines Education Foundation and the Get to College program. We are recording today's session and we'll send a link to this recording to anyone who is registered. For those watching the recording, today's date is February 1st, 2022, and the material in this webinar is current through the 21-22 school year. In today's session, Making Data-Driven Decisions to Support Students' College Journey, you will hear about ways to use data to help inform the work you do with students as they prepare for post-secondary options. I will now share a little background on Get to College and a few logistics about the webinar before we get started. Get to College is a nonprofit program of the Woodward-Hines Education Foundation. We have 3 centers in Mississippi, one in Jackson, Ocean Springs, and South Haven, and we help parents, students, and high school counselors with all aspects of college planning and financial aid. And best of all of our services are 100% completely free. In our centers, we offer personalized college counseling appointments where we can help students know when to apply for admission and scholarships, help fill out their FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and advise on essay writing and interviewing. As Kirsten said earlier, during the webinar, we cannot see or hear you, but we ask that you will ask questions at any time through the chat or through the Q&A. So here's our agenda for the day. We're doing our introduction now, then we'll have our presentation, then we will have a formal Q&A session at the end. And then we will brief you on our upcoming webinars and give you our contact information. My co-presenter, Kirsten Dufour, will be monitoring and replying to the Q&A today. But as I said, we will have time for live Q&A at the end, but feel free to message your questions at any time. I would now like to introduce our speakers for the day. Bill DeBon is NCAN's Director of Data and Evaluation. In that role, he researches and writes about college access and success programming that demonstrates significant results for students' college enrollment and graduation rates, while additionally providing technical assistance to other initiatives. Other activities include the creation, development, and maintenance of the Form Your Future FAFSA tracker, and the provision of technical assistance to school districts in projects like the To and Through Advising Challenge. Bill has a bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in education studies from American University and a master's degree in public policy from the George Washington University. Our next presenter is Stacy Sneed. Stacy is the Assistant Director and Data Management Coordinator for Get to College, in addition to being one of our resident data nerds. She is originally from Louisiana, but has called Jackson home since 1989. She completed her bachelor's degree at Millsaps College and worked in corporate America for many years. Stacy manages our database and reporting infrastructure, creating reports and data visualizations that are easy to understand and accurately tell the story of our college access work. Oh, and by the way, when Stacy grows up, she wants to be Bill DeBon. I will now turn the presentation over to you, Bill, and we look forward to hearing from y'all.
All right. Well, thank you for that very warm introduction. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. Let me make sure I get the the sharing right here. Everything look okay on the presentation end? Okay, super. Well, thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to be here. I love the folks at Woodward Hines. I love the work that they're doing in the state of Mississippi. I think our country would be a lot better if every state had a Woodward Hines in their corner, working for students and those who work with them. So it really is a special pleasure to be here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, making data-driven decisions. So you heard a little bit about me. I'm going to put my contact information up here. I wouldn't put my email up here if I didn't want you to use it. So please drop me a line if you have questions, big or small. I surely will get back to you. And if I can't answer your question, I will do my best to get you someone who can. I hope that some of you are familiar with the National College Attainment Network, from which I hail. If you're not, we are a mission-driven member organization, nonprofit based here in Washington, D.C. And our efforts are around closing post-secondary access and attainment gaps for students. We do our work through three kind of big buckets of work. We strengthen our members, we advocate for students, both at the federal and the state levels, and we try to expand the field by bringing more stakeholders into our work and helping them better understand how they can better serve students. Why do we do this work? We do this work because we know that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. These are college enrollment rates from the first fall after high school graduation for the class of 2018 by different high school categories. And you can see that there are pretty significant enrollment gaps on the basis of income and student demographics in our high schools. I'm probably not telling you too much that you don't know there, but you may not know how much worse things are getting in the era of COVID. So these are year over year fall post-secondary enrollment declines for the class of 2020, and we can see much steeper drops, especially where income is concerned for students. So I want to just keep kind of the enrollment crisis that we are staring at front and center today as we talk about how data can help us better serve students. So some of my goals today, I want to show you some different options for accessing data that shows where students go after high school. I want to talk a little bit about how to use this data to help students make better post-secondary choices. And I want to leave plenty of time for your questions and thoughts, and of course for Stacy to share her great knowledge with you all as well. So I have a couple of questions just to kind of get a feel for the virtual room, as it were. So here's the first one. What is currently your biggest hurdle to tracking post-secondary outcomes data? I'm glad you put up multiple choice, because I had thought originally this is going to be a discrete question, but very possible that it's one or more of these choices. All right, we'll give another couple seconds there. Kirsten, is there something I need to do to show the results here? Oh, okay. I was like, oh, am I not clicking the button? Okay, so we've got a pretty clear winner here. A lack of time, and staff have enough on their plates. Totally empathize with that. There is plenty on schools' plates right now. Not knowing where to find the data is something that I hope to directly address over the course of this presentation. Not a current organizational priority. I see 25 quarter of you or so selecting that. Hopefully we can kind of shift that a little bit, and then the personnel skill mismatch coming in a distant fourth. Okay. My next question here is, how do you currently track student outcomes after high school? So NSC here is the National Student Clearinghouse, in case you are not familiar with NSC. Oh. Okay. So I'm very interested to hear what the other choices are there. So if you want to put those into the Q&A for me, that would really help me understand kind of what some of the other options are out there. We're going to talk about the National Student Clearinghouse today, partner reporting and statewide tools. Not currently tracking, about a third of respondents selecting that one. So hopefully I will give you some better options. So we got one more poll here. So on a scale of 1, which is the low end of the scale, to 10, which is the high end, how much of a priority is tracking post-secondary outcomes for your district, school, or organization? Just one more second. After this, the pop quiz will end, at least for now, I promise you. Okay. All right, pretty good normal distribution there. All right, perfect. Thank you. This is very helpful for me as I kind of ramp in here. So before I start talking about the different options for finding post-secondary outcomes data, here are what I think some key questions that every district, school, and program should be able to answer, no matter the source that they're using. If you can't answer these now, totally understand that you may be ramping up toward that some of these may be useful. I'm not going to read them to you, but the one that I do want to highlight to you is especially, how do the answers to these questions vary according to students' demographics, right? Looking at the outcomes here in the aggregate is useful, but when we disaggregate by student characteristics, either gender, income, race, ethnicity, any number of student characteristics, we can really start to see some kind of inequities and gaps there. One, you heard from my bio, I spent a lot of time thinking about data, spent a lot of time thinking about post-secondary outcomes data. It may surprise you to find out that I really am not a proponent of data for data's sake. I talk to practitioners a lot about their kind of data challenges and their data needs, and nothing actually is more kind of disheartening or more frustrating than for me to see people collect data and not be putting it to good use, or not know how to use it, or just saying they're just collecting it for the sake of it. So I guess my question here is, the question I get sometimes is like, well, why care about post-secondary outcomes data so much? Like if you're in the K-12 sector. And I guess I'm not trying to be glib when I say this, but my answer is like, well, why care about anything in education? I think the reason for that is because we think it is to students' benefit. And so the contention that I want to make is that being able to answer these questions, not just for their own sake, but in terms of how they inform, how we help to guide students into their next best post-secondary option after they leave our doors from high school, is an incredible benefit to students, can help to shape their futures and can help to put them on a path to success. And I think that's what we're all kind of working for and working toward in the education system. So the answers to these questions really do help to build a strategy, a thoughtful approach to guiding students to what the next best match is for them after high school graduation. So with that said, I want to touch today on 4 pathways to measuring post-secondary outcomes. And you can see that we're going to talk about student surveys, we're going to talk about direct relationships with institutions, we're going to talk about state data portals, and we're going to talk about the NSC, the National Student Clearinghouse. And as we step up the rungs of this ladder here, we're getting into more and more levels of sophistication in terms of the quality of data, in terms of the granularity of the data, in terms of how frequently it's updated. And so, we're going to start here at student surveys. So I think about student surveys as, let me see if I can hide this one. Oh, I think about student surveys as time intensive, less reliable, but at least you're keeping everything all in house. You're not relying on external partners to administer student surveys. So the pros here, these are inexpensive in terms of actual dollar amounts. But I would say that the flip side of that is that they're time intensive, and our staff time, the time to administer them, the time to analyze those data, those are expensive. They don't come without cost. Pros, also easily adapted to whatever your local context is, whatever your school needs are, whatever kind of idiosyncratic questions you want to ask about your student population. Surveys are also relatively easy to build out and analyze. You don't need, to be a data wizard to kind of sketch out a survey, and there are a lot of other resources out there that kind of make administering surveys much easier than some of the methods we're going to talk about downstream here. Some of the other cons, these are less scientific, they're less reliable, they're really reliant on which students are responding to your survey and the quality of the data that the students give you. They're also prone to sampling bias. If your survey is being systematically responded to by only certain groups of students, or you have underreporting among certain groups of students, that is going to make your end result data, less reliable. And if you're making decisions on unreliable data, it can lead you to make, bad decisions or badly informed decisions, I guess I should say. So lots of districts and schools already use senior exit surveys, but my experience is that lots of districts and schools are not making good use of the data from the senior exit surveys. This is largely because they are senior exit surveys. They're coming at the end of the year when commencement and everything else is going on. And, once students leave the door, there's not like a lot of utility to the senior exit survey data oftentimes. So my advice here is to administer these early in the year. The more time you give yourself, the broader the window you give yourself, the more time you have to act on the answers you're getting from these surveys. So how should we collect this actual data? You can do it the paper and pencil way. You can do it electronically. Collecting electronically means that there's less data entry for staff, but it also can be more difficult to tell who actually completed the survey. If your kind of school information system or school platform like a Naviance, for example, has surveys, then maybe it's a little bit easier to see on the back end who completed and who didn't. If you're administering in paper to everyone in homeroom, for example, or in all math classes, you can be pretty sure you're going to get better coverage of students than you would otherwise if you just give students a link and say, hey, please complete this. Some of the key.
We probably have a lot of our participants shaking their heads right now, because based off the feedback, what you asked for about the poll question on that other category, it seems like student reporting and surveys is the consistent piece that's been reported. And so I know that we probably have a lot of our webinar attendees today that are yes to this and that. And one question that really came up earlier was the priority is on them as the attendee here, but they want to increase the priority for their district. And so I'm excited to see how we can do that in the next steps of the rungs.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to the student surveys are the lowest rung on my ladder, but it doesn't mean that I'm not trying to disparage them. I mean, I'm trying to give you kind of a clear-eyed pros and cons here. I think there is a lot of flexibility that surveys provide to you. they're also very time intensive, and they're only really as good as your data collection method and your survey instrument and your willingness to analyze those things. And if you are missing, one of the legs of that three-legged stool, it turns out the whole survey is going to topple over on you. So in terms of items that you want to make sure your survey covers, yeah, I've put some here. You can read them. I think the general 10,000 foot thing here is you want to get a sense of what students' post-secondary trajectory is, what their intention is. If you're doing any summer melt work, if you're providing assistance to students over the course of the summer, also just asking some qualitative questions about how confident students are about their post-secondary pathway really can help you identify who you might want to try to get in touch with over the summer, or who you want to might have a partner organization get in touch with over the summer, just to provide them some reassurance to be able to troubleshoot any issues that they have going on. Now, this is kind of like the boring part, but I think a really important piece of surveys are verifying birth date and a legal first name and last name. So that way, if you want to verify either through a state data portal or the National Student Clearinghouse, that you have that data later on. You also want to confirm contact information, getting either an email or a phone number or both, because the other piece about the survey is this is all the kind of pre-survey, right? This is all the before they leave your doors. What is their intention? But to really understand post-secondary outcomes, we also need to get a post-survey. We need to verify what actually happened to these students. So depending on either your school capacity or which approach you prefer, you can either call or email or text or get in touch in some other form or fashion a random sample of seniors in the following fall and spring to hear about their post-secondary outcome. Did they matriculate? Where did they matriculate? Are they in the workforce? Are they doing something else? Or you can create a whole other post survey and send that out through the contact information that you collected in the pre-survey. This is where you want to make sure in the survey that you have some way to link students in both surveys, right? Either first name and last name or their student ID, just so you don't have two kind of separate data sets floating around out here. Now, the real level up for me on school surveys is, we talked on the senior exit survey about the earlier you administer in the academic year, the bigger a window you have to act on the data you're collecting. Well, let's open the window up even further and say, if we start administering a post-secondary intention survey every year starting in 9th grade, we could get a much, much, much earlier sense of what students' aspirations and plans and uncertainties are related to post-secondary, right? You can ask them about whether they know about financial aid. You can ask them if they're planning on going to workforce or to a community college or for a certificate or for if they have four-year aspirations. And it gives you a chance to watch the trajectory of students' aspirations and plans. It gives you a chance to get appropriate supports to students based on those plans. And where you have students who are like undermatching, for example, according to their academic profile, if you have a student who has a great GPA, is taking challenging coursework, but maybe doesn't think of themselves as someone who is a good fit for a four-year institution, that gives you a much broader window to talk with that student about what possible post-secondary options are that might better fit their academic profile. So again, this is where that flexibility comes in of when you can administer it, what kinds of things you're putting in a survey. So I put some survey resources here. I really like this college advising course in your exit survey guide. I've got different sample surveys and items here. I've got a survey data section in the for the fall brief. So if this is the route that you're either going right now or that you would like to pursue, I think this slide is one you should bookmark. So the next step up the ladder is this making progress one by one, where you have direct relationships with institutions. So if you're anything like a lot of districts and schools that I work with, you have a pretty set matriculation pattern for where your students are going after high school. And you know that a big part of your pie chart is going to 2, 3, 4 post-secondary institutions. Well, some districts just build relationships directly with those colleges and universities. And to get kind of post-secondary enrollment data on whether students wound up there or not. So the pros here are that it helps to kind of solidify an even better relationship with the higher ed institutions, that you already might be working with on things like financial aid nights or FAFSA completion. You might already be talking to the admissions office there to to get admissions materials for the counseling office. Another pro is that once you've established a memorandum of understanding or a data sharing agreement with an institution, it should be pretty easy to get the data from them, and it shouldn't be too hard to analyze. It's also low cost. It doesn't really cost too much or anything to set up an MOU or a data sharing agreement. The cons, and this is a big one, no one really likes the legal stuff. Like the hammering out MOUs and DSAs can be tricky. You might have to get district general counsel involved. You might have to get district administration involved. Like the legalese part of it is the part where I tend to see some eye rolling. Another con is that it's giving you an incomplete picture of your whole graduating class. It's only capturing the portion of your graduating class where you have a data sharing agreement with an institution. So if you have a lot of students going, to out of state, for example, or you have students going to institutions that aren't willing to play ball on a data sharing agreement, then that's going to be that portion of your graduating class is going to be a blind spot for you, right? This also doesn't scale too well. We're going to talk about that in the next slide. So you want to set up relationships directly where you have the largest pipeline. And so you can see in the two very complex Microsoft Paint images that I've created for you here, that the one on the left is a good fit for this approach because the institution the high school has students going merely to 3 institutions. But on the right, if you've got this scatter shot where 2 to 3% of your graduating class is going to 9, 10, 11, 12 institutions, that's gonna be a lot of work to set up all these data sharing agreements. If you determine that your school's matriculation pattern is a good fit for this approach, you want to start with the registrar's office of the institution. But if you have a relationship with admissions at that institution, then they can be a good champion for you. They might already have a relationship with you, again, about financial aid nights or other kinds of materials they're sending. And so they might be able to vouch for you and open some doors in the registrar's office to get this data pipeline turned on here. I've got some resources here on the bottom about FERPA, everyone's favorite 5-letter acronym about education privacy. And then there's a good resource here about how to set up data sharing agreements with different partners. So moving one more step up the ladder is what I think about as the luck of the draw. So state data portals. So states increasingly are collecting post-secondary outcomes data and reporting it in some way, shape, or form. The in some way, shape, or form part is really important because this varies so much from state to state in terms of what kinds of years are available, how often it's updated, what level the data are displayed at. Is it the school level? Is it the district level? Is it the county level? Can you get access to student level data if you're a counselor and you log into the portal? So if you're in a state where the state longitudinal data system is good, that's great. If you're not, you may find it to be outdated and inflexible and kind of limiting in terms of what kind of insights you're actually getting. I think kind of what I've seen nearly universally, although there are a few states who are doing this pretty well, is that the state data portals also tend to omit post-secondary enrollments from private institutions. So they're capturing public institution enrollment data because the state has access to that through boards of regents or state higher education agencies, but there's not always a connection between the state's private institutions or out-of-state institutions and the state's longitudinal data system. This last con here is also one that I want to call your attention to. I spent a lot of time on state education agency websites looking for this kind of stuff, and I will tell you, I still get lost on a lot of state websites all the time. They are not super intuitive, and so you do have to do a little bit of poking around. They're not normally putting in bright neon signs. Hey, this is the thing that you want in terms of state post-secondary outcomes data. Free tip to any state officials who are on the call. Big neon signs saying, here's the link to the state post-secondary outcomes data. I would take those neon signs. So on the public-facing side, these state data portals, they usually consist of a menu of reports and tables and dashboards, usually the district and school levels. And I think those tables are best for making either comparisons to other school districts, to neighboring school districts, or for benchmarking your own kind of post-secondary outcomes year over year and building a trend. So if you want to, take a look at your district or your school and look at what it was for the past 5 or 6 years and make a little line chart about, what the trend has been, state data portals are pretty good for that. They are not always super great for looking at student level outcomes and really getting into the nitty gritty of where individual students and particular groups of students enrolled after high school. Again, some but not all of these platforms have user logins. So let me take a look at Mississippi. I found a couple of different examples here. So LifeTracks has this portal that I think you can also drill down into the district and school, and you can look at all the different outcomes for high school graduates here. Again, though, the most recent year in LifeTracks is 2019. So 2019, incidentally, was the last year before our world got topsy-turvy. And so I would not recommend fully committing to benchmarking your class of 2020, 21, 22 outcomes against the class of 2019. Chances are it is not going to be the most charitable comparison. There's also from the MSRC at the Mississippi Department of Education, you can get these kind of district level post-secondary enrollment comparisons. Again, these are good top line numbers. And if you're looking at it year over year over year, you can get a trend, but there's just not a lot of granularity here. And so there's not a ton, to dig into on the publicly available data in Mississippi. So looking elsewhere, this is one of the websites in Florida. Again, you can see the graduation year is 2018-19, so it's not just Mississippi who's a little bit behind on the data updating. But you can see here that they're breaking out post-secondary enrollment by different kinds of student groups. So that's a little bit more granularity that's very helpful. And then this is very interesting. This is from the FEPTIP, and I should have written down the acronym, but I didn't. This is the FEPTIP system in Florida, and for districts and schools, they're kind of breaking out what kinds of pathways students went on following high school graduation. Interestingly, this portal also has kind of wage outcome data, which is something I don't often see. And that's also really useful. If you have a lot of students who are going into the workforce directly from high school, you may want to know, are they getting a living wage? And in what span of time are they getting a living wage after they're leaving your doors? This is another example from Georgia. This is from the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. And you can also see just the variety of data visualizations here is pretty wide. But we can see what the graduate outcomes were the year after high school graduation. This is for class of 2017, so this is even more outdated. But again, these are the kinds of data you can expect to see from these state data portals. Now, if you are looking at your screen or you're listening to me and you're hearing me talk about all the caveats about these first three options, you are probably saying to yourself, there has got to be a catch here, right? Because this guy's telling me that all of these things have serious drawbacks. Why is he recommending these to me at all? None of these options seems all that great. And I will tell you that none of them is perfect. I think they all have their uses. They all have use cases where they can be valuable. Not one of them is perfect. I'm here to tell you, unfortunately, the perfect data source doesn't really exist. But I do want to talk to you about one that I think is quite valuable and quite flexible. So the National Student Clearinghouse, here's that NSC acronym again. The National Student Clearinghouse has a platform called the Student Tracker. And to me, nationally, this is the most comprehensive source of college enrollment data out there. It's got timely data. It's flexible in terms of analysis. You can look at it going back 8 high school graduating classes. It's really affordable for the quality of the data you're getting. It's about $600 per high school per year. It comes with a packet of pre-constructed reports that you don't have to analyze. It just comes, this PDF packet of reports comes to your inbox 3 times a year, and you can generate a ton of insights just from that packet without ever touching the underlying data, without ever opening Excel. And on top of that, they have a version coming out later, a version of Student Tracker coming out later this year that's going to be much more user-friendly. Some of the cons are that in the current iteration, there's a fairly steep learning curve. If you really want to dive deep into the data, and Stacy can speak to this, it's a little bit tricky. You really do have to be kind of a data analyst or willing to learn some some kind of data related chops, as it were, to to make good use of the underlying data, assuming you're not satisfied with just looking at the PDF that comes with it. Again, this isn't really plug and play in the sense that there's some work to build the graduate file, submit it to the NSC, and to get the data back. So let me ask here, actually, I think I can probably skip this, Kirsten, because so few people responded about having NSC data in the first question. So I'm going to assume that the most folks here do not have access to the NSC. And so bear with me as I give you a little bit of crash course here. The National Student Clearinghouse is a nonprofit, and they serve just a vast majority of college and universities in the United States. And the institutions that they serve cover somewhere between 96 and 98% of all enrollments at public and private US institutions. And they are collecting by institution, by student, by semester, enrollment and completion data from all those post-secondary institutions. They just keep it in a massive digital warehouse. And so they allow districts, states, districts, schools, community-based organizations to use their student tracker service, where you upload a list of your students with their first name, last name, date of birth, graduating class, and you send that to the NSC, and they send you back all the information they can match about those students' post-secondary outcomes. We're going to have a handy visual on the next slide that kind of walks you through those steps. But the tracker is a vital tool because it lets you get a sense of what are my baseline post-secondary enrollment persistence and completion rates. That data comes right in the PDF that I was just talking about. And then you can measure kind of changes against those outcomes, those benchmarked outcomes. So if you had Student Tracker, you can see from 2019 to 2020, 21, how has COVID impacted my post-secondary outcomes, in my district or my school. These data also let you benchmark your outcomes against national high school benchmarks. So by rurality, or by low income or higher income, or high minority or low minority, you can get a sense of how is my high school doing in terms of post-secondary outcomes relative to institutions across the country. So here's how the tracker works. Again, you submit a file, the student cohort you want to study. NSC runs your file against their national database. They make the matches. Then they send you this handy report. Nice flow chart here. So these are the kind of charts you could expect to see in that aggregate report that I was talking about. Here we've got enrollment by institution type, by public or private. It's not all charts like that. They also show you kind of year by year student outcomes, like by graduating class. And so you can start to see, when did my students stop out? Like, what is my second year persistence rate? How many of my students are getting, are getting to year 4 and then stopping out, which obviously is just a devastating outcome. It's also a really valuable tool. We know kind of we know kind of intuitively where our students are going in districts, but they provide you a report of where your students actually attended, and they'll do this over however many graduating classes you include in your data file. And so they'll scale it over you'll see over the past 8 years, we've sent X% of students to these institutions. So I was talking about the granular data that comes with the National Student Clearinghouse. This is what that looks like, this detail report. I'm just going to be totally honest with you. This is more complicated. And Stacey, I assume we'll talk about this again. I think the payoff is really worth it. But even if you never touch this, the NSC is a good source of data on your students' post-secondary outcomes. If you provide them with student demographic data, they will send you a whole packet of reports that have the data disaggregated by student gender, by student race, ethnicity. And so that can also save you a ton of time. So some of my parting thoughts before I turn it over to Stacey. Rome wasn't built in a day. So collecting some data, collecting whatever you can get your hands on right now, whatever you have the capacity to analyze or collect, and building on top of that is way better than not collecting any data. It can be discouraging to feel like there's always more questions that you need to answer. It's totally fair. I feel that same way, and I work with data every day. But don't let that invalidate the questions that you can answer, that can be valuable in shaping your post-secondary advising, that can be helpful in assisting students. If this presentation wound up sounding like a sales pitch for the National Student Clearinghouse, I did not intend for it to be that way. I'm just being honest. I've worked with all of these different kinds of data sources, and I think it is the most comprehensive look at high school graduating classes, especially when you want to do it over time. There just is not a lot. There's not a national alternative that is as comprehensive as the National Student Clearinghouse is. So I don't mean to sound sales pitchy. I'm not a paid representative. This is just kind of my honest opinion as a data analyst. So, sorry about the sales pitchiness if that's how it came across. The last piece here is that NCAN will hopefully be doing some work with states about how states can best get this kind of post-secondary enrollment data into district and school practitioners' hands. So stay tuned on that. We certainly will keep Woodward Hines apprised of those efforts. I didn't spend a whole lot of time today talking about how to connect data to changing post-secondary advising practice. I would be happy to come back and talk about that some more. I think the biggest thing is using this data to understand, where did students go? How did they do when they got there? How has that all varied by students' demographics? And then how can you use the insights from those first 3 questions to shape your advising for future classes? So if you're seeing patterns in the data about where your students are going and that they're not persisting to the second year, or they're not getting a degree within 6 years, 3 years for community colleges, or 6 years for 4 institutions, that may shape the kind of advice that you give to upcoming classes. Anyway, NCAN has a lot of resources about this. I'm happy to send some of them along with the slides as well. I'm going to hand it over here to Stacy. My email is here. So I look forward to hearing from you. And I'm also looking forward to your questions and Q&A. So thanks again for your time. Thanks for being here, letting me talk about one of my favorite topics. And Stacy, it's all you.
All right, thank you. Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Just to follow up on what you just said about using the data, I kid you not, with the schools in Mississippi that we've assisted in accessing and analyzing and using the National Student Clearinghouse information, we were able to identify, let's say we're 65% of the graduating class was enrolling, but they were not persisting and they were not completing. So it was an opportunity for that high school or that district to go speak directly to that institution and say, hey, let's partner. How can we make this a better place for our students who are coming here to continue their education? And it works. I mean, because they want them to be successful. Very expensive to lose students. But if you don't know, then you can't address it. So it's been eye-opening, just the few schools that we haven't been able to look at here in Mississippi. I'm going to share with y'all a few tools that Get to College has created to assist the Mississippi students, families, and high schools in this area of college advising, college planning, well, anyway. So the first one I'm going to show is our high school dashboard. All of these are on the Get to College website, but the links will be sent to you tomorrow in the, I guess it's in whatever format they send the presentation. This is a high school dashboard that we update every year. It's only used showing public high schools, unfortunately, at this time, because for a variety of reasons. But anyway, you go here to the drop-down menu. You can choose.
Stacy, if you'll just hit the share screen, we're not seeing your screen quite yet.
Thank you, Kirsten. Hold on. Why not? I thought okay. Better?
Yes.
Bravo. Thank you. Okay. So this is a high school snapshot that Get to College Woodward Hines has created. Has all the public high schools listed on it, showing you a variety of data points that we found while we traveled around the state that sometimes counselors, even principals, didn't have access to readily. So we just kind of put all these data points together for each of the public high schools and update it every year. This is the drop-down menu where you can choose your high school, and everything will refresh. Let's just pick that one. And it'll be customized to the one that you choose. It includes the graduation rate, the senior class size, the post-secondary enrollment. This is something that MDE calculates, but there is some flexibility and variability into like the accuracy of it, because it may in fact not include those that go out of state and some other caveats. Free and reduced lunch. It shows you a comparison of the average junior class ACT score. And this is, I try to keep it as current as possible. So it's showing your school. Right now we're looking at Blue Mountain High, what their average ACT for the juniors last year was compared to the state ACT. And then it shows you a comparison as to last year's. It also will show you the FAFSA completion percentage at this school by the all-important March 31 deadline. This is the help grant deadline, which we try to push and push and push and encourage all high school counselors to encourage their students to complete their FAFSA by the March 31 deadline to ensure that the students have access to as much financial resources as possible. So this is last year's FAFSA cycle. This March 31, this will be refreshed, showing this year's class of 2022's FAFSA cycle. So you can see they went up. No, they went down, sorry. As of March 31 last year, Blue Mountain had a 40% FAFSA completion rate. By the end of the school year, which we call, well, end of the summer, which is right before they go off to college, they had a completion rate of 55%. These are interesting figures, and superintendents and principals are becoming more and more interested in these. So just know that this is available to you every day and is updated as frequently as possible. Another important figure that we show is the number of help grant eligible students came from your school during the class of 19, 20, and 21. Ideally, we'd like to see these numbers going up, but this is also just, it's information that you have access to that you can share with those that are interested at your school. All right, the next website is a college snapshot that we've created. And again, there's a drop-down menu here, and these are the top schools that the students that we serve primarily are interested in. So it's not all 3,000 of the schools, but it's just the ones that our students are primarily interested in. So you can pick your school. Let's pick Hines, and everything will be updated to show the associated costs, enrollment, retention, etc. for that community college or four-year college, whichever one you choose. The first one's going to show you the cost, and then the cost less the average amount of aid that the students are getting. They're going to have a breakdown of all the costs, the tuition, the housing, books, transportation, personal. When this is made available, not all of these data points are made available, but when they are available, they're included here. And then importantly, it's going to tell you of the kids that enrolled, let's just say in 2019, that percent of that group that then re-enrolled and continued their education in the fall of 2020 were 60%. It'll show you the completion rate. For this would be Hines Community College is a 2-year school. So within 2 years, 26% have completed their degree. And within a time and a half, it says 26% has too, but that has me bothered. I'm gonna have to check that. Also talks about some admission points, the ACT score, when it is shared, whether or not they will super score ACTs, the admissions deadline, the financial aid deadlines or priority deadlines, and then of course the all important help grant deadline. It'll show you the breakout of the class for the previous year by race, in-state, out-of-state, and if they're full-time or part-time. Now, another advantageous tool on this website is the ability for counselors, families, students to go in and select, let's say, the 5 schools they're the most interested in attending. and to take a look at a comparison. Let's see. Comparison of cost, comparison of demographics of the class, and you can change these figures. You can say, okay, I want to see a comparison by cost or the percent of cost. You can also go in here and change by these different variables. If you want to see, let's say, how many out of state, then it adjusts. So you can do comparison. How many students go to the school from out of state? That is the college snapshot. We've done the high school dashboard, and then the next tool that we've created to hopefully help high school counselors and families and our students is a FAFSA tracker. My fingers are crossed that y'all are familiar with this and that you may refer to it from time to time. This is simply a weekly updated report of FAFSA completion percentages by high school as of the most recent federal reporting date. And it can be sorted and filtered in a variety of ways. So if everybody on our webinar was from a 6A school, because we know that all the 6A schools and 5As and 4As can be somewhat competitive, I would look here, click the 6A and see, okay, these are the top performing high schools in Mississippi in regards to FAFSA completions in that category. You can also then come down here and choose it the same thing. You can filter and sort by the highest FAFSA completion percentage this year or the highest FAFSA completion percentage from last year. You can select an individual school. So we go and pick, what was it, Blue Mountain we were looking at earlier. Oops. They might need our help, Kirsten. There, Bay Springs. So Bay Springs has increased the percent of FAFSAs completed by their senior class significantly from this year to last year. And if you hover on this, it'll give you the details as to what that really means and what the numbers, the actual numbers of the number of FAFSA completions are. You can also filter by public, private, and then we have the tribal high school. Another one, and Bill has already shown you this, but what I have found to be so interesting is you can do a comparison of high schools. So if you wanted to compare one in your district to another 6A school that you're rivaling with and wanted to see some of their data points, you can type it in here. So let's say Oxford. What's another 6A? Oxford and let's DeSoto.
Madison Central.
Madison, here I got it. Is DeSoto?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you just pick your high school and then we compare. A lot of things that wouldn't necessarily have impact necessary for college planning, but if you continue to scroll down and when these data points are available, you can look at post-secondary enrollment and it'll show you that Oxford's post-secondary enrollment, and again, this is coming probably from the state, which may be getting it from NSPARC, that they're going to show you the comparison of these two schools. You can do it just for your school too, if you're looking just for one. Let me show you. And it's a little more current than some of our other available resources. Let's just look at this. I want to be able to show you and again, these links are going to be provided to you tomorrow. And for some schools, they do have a little bit more, a little additional information, but it's not available for all of them, I'm finding. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, and if this is a data point which is being shown and you click on it, and again, this is what Bill showed you previously. You can see comparison of Mississippi post-secondary enrollment versus the Oxford School District And because there's only one high school there, the high school and the district enrollment percentages are the same. But it'll also break it out by some other characteristics, student characteristics, should you be interested. Again, ideally, you would like to have, again, this is for what year? The 2021 year, which is a lot more current than it used to be. But again, that was COVID. Ideally, we'd love to see the enrollment percentages broken down by student characteristics, where they're going to school, where they're persisting, and are they completing? And that way you can adjust your counseling to your high school seniors to best serve them. Okay, fine, if everyone is doing well and going to Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, we'll continue to encourage our students to go there. But if we find that there is a significant dip in persistence or retention, it may be time to have a conversation with admissions and student services to see what it is that together the high school and the community college can do to increase that number, to help the students coming from your school. Or you may identify that a majority of your students are enrolling in another community college where they're not persisting and have not persisted for years. Well, we might want to adjust then the counseling that we provide to those future seniors, unless there's a way to address that issue at the school level.
Stacy, we do have one question as we are wrapping up here, and I'm going to
Okay,
ask
good.
it to both you and to Bill. The question that has been asked, we have some CTE personnel on this webinar today, and they're curious if some of the data points could be that you shared with the Get to College information can be broken out by the career and technical education. They acknowledge that they pull from several high schools in the district. And so I wanted to pose that to you, Stacy, first, and then to Bill to see if the data that was shared, if there's any way that could be in the CTE specific.
Unfortunately, no. Well, for FAFSA completion, I can't segment. It's only going to be listed by the high school. It's not broken out by the CTE subset of students because it's a federal report and they only identify by high school. For the high school dashboard, again, this is only going to be for the overall high school. What could be done using National Student Clearinghouse is creating a subset of students or extrapolating out from the entire school population, those students that can be identified by the CTE director or teacher. They could be identified and they be extracted, and then you can track them as a separate set of students. But the best way, and truly the only way I can think of right now to do that, would be through Clearinghouse. I can't do it in FAFSA, and I can't do it just on our dashboard. Bill, do you have any suggestions?
No, I think that's right. I think you can go a step further, on the CTE side. You can go beyond CTE is what I'm saying. If you have different groups of students within your high school that you would be interested in segmenting their post-secondary outcomes, the tracker does make it very easy to put with the student when you're submitting the graduate file to say, this student had, I don't know, X number of extracurriculars, right? Or if for some reason you thought participating in band, right, was going to impact post-secondary enrollment outcomes, you could certainly flag that in the tracker data too. And then when the data came back, just separate it all on the backside. That is quite easy, but I don't know of a way beyond like submitting a granular data file where you could get at that.
Well, they have to be identified, period. I mean, at a student level. So anyway, we'd love to help y'all do that. I mean, it can be done using National Student Clearinghouse reporting. All right, trying to think. Those are these are the three main tools that Get to College Woodward Hines has created in order to help serve our high schools and our students and families. When using these, if you find anything that you have questions about or want to drill down on or additional information on any of it, please feel free to reach out to us. I guess my email is going to be in tomorrow's little package. I would love to hear from any one of y'all, questions, suggestions, or thoughts. Just holler at me.
Stacey, if you don't mind, as we're wrapping up, maybe drop your email in the chat too. And Bill, maybe you might want to drop yours too. I know it was in the previous slide, but that way we want to respect everybody's time. We are getting close to the 11 o'clock hour, but please know that Bill and Stacey are available to help you guys at any point. And I appreciate everyone's interaction on this. It seems like this was a very timely subject that a lot of folks are interested in that may require some follow-up. So thank you again, Bill and Stacey. For our participants, we would appreciate it if you would complete the short survey that will automatically pop up at the end of the meeting. Please fill that out and give us any feedback on today's webinar so that we can keep improving. Let me show my slides. Hold on 1 minute. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's a few websites. And again, y'all are going to get this presentation, but Stacey kind of dropped these in here as a slide. If I'll give y'all a second to maybe snap a photo of it if you want to, but it will be in the presentation. Okay. All right. So I think we've addressed all the questions that we had. This was our today's webinar is the second in our spring series. Our spring topic Tuesdays will continue through the month of May 2022. You can see the remaining spring topics here, and that information is on our website as well. If you participate in 5 webinars for the 2021 school year, you can apply for 0.5 CEUs. And if you attend all 10 fall and spring webinars, you can apply for 1 full CEU. You can register for all of these webinars on our Get to College website, and they're listed under the Educator tab, and then choose Professional Development. While you're there registering, please check out all the other resources, many of those that Stacey showed you today, under the Educator tab on our website. There's lots of information there for you guys. Just a few things coming up. We're going to be helping host a course for the Master Teacher of College and Career Readiness course. The course will begin on June 1st, 2022, and registration will open on April 1st through the Mississippi Council for Economic Education's website. So Kirsten's kind of leading that. So if y'all have any questions about that, let her know, but there's some opportunities there for the master teacher. And then we are in the process of updating all of our summer and fall 22 summer training. So just keep checking the website for that. And as soon as we get those listed, we'll let you guys know about that. Also, we have a couple more CCR teacher chat opportunities available on February 23rd and March 30th. And all of those will take place from 3 to 4:15. And you can register for those again on that same fabulous professional development tab on our website. All right, and here is our contact information. Bill, Stacey, anything else as we wrap up?
No, thank you for having me, and thanks for your time today. Appreciate you all coming.
You're very welcome. As I said earlier, feel free to reach out to any of us here at Get to College, and Bill and Stacey, your resident data nerds, as they like to call themselves. So thank you so much again for having us today, and we look forward to seeing you in March at the next Topic Tuesday. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye now.